Namaskar, this is Late Edition. On the show tonight, we'll discuss the Central Information Commission's ruling that political parties are public authorities under Section 2H of the RTI Act. Now, Section 2H of the RTI Act defines a public authority as an authority, body or institution of self-government established by Constitution, law of Parliament, law of state legislature, or by notification of appropriate government. Now, the CIC ruled that political parties are constituted by their registration with the Election Commission, which is appropriate government, and that they are substantially funded by institutions of appropriate government. However, most political parties and the government too find the reasoning of the CIC flawed.
The Congress is not against transparency. The Congress is, as you have just pointed out, the Congress spokesman is against the order of the CIC, holding that a political party falls under the RTI. It's a rather unusual interpretation of the provisions of the RTI Act. And the reasons given to describe political parties as public authorities within the meaning of the RTI Act strains credulity.
Well, let's look at how political parties are accountable to the public by legislation in different countries.
The recent full bench judgment of the 2H of the RTI Act should be understood in the context of how other constitutional democracies look at the same issue. Let's look at our neighborhood. In Pakistan, political parties don't come under the Freedom of Information Ordinance 2002, although they submit information to the Election Commission of Pakistan on annual audited accounts, internal party elections and assets of elected members of parliament and state legislatures. Sri Lanka has no freedom of information legislation, and hence political parties are not obliged to furnish any information about their operations. In Nepal, political parties are covered under the definition of public bodies under Section 2A of Nepal's Right to Information Act 2007, though very few parties follow their obligations. In Bangladesh, political parties do not come under the RTI Act, but under Representation of People Order Act, they are required to submit pre-poll and post-poll expenditure details to the Election Commission. Though the Maldives does not have a freedom of information legislation, the Elections Act makes it statutory for political parties to make full disclosure of all financial matters relating to the election. Let's look at some other countries in the world. In Sweden, freedom of information is linked to protection of whistleblowers. Even secret information can be passed on to journalists or the general public without criminal charges. In Mexico, any citizen can ask the Federal Electoral Institute about public resources received by political parties. In Australia, political parties and independent candidates are required to disclose all electoral expenses, including donations and advertising. In Poland, political parties are public bodies and come under the Freedom of Information Act. The UK Parliament is covered by the Act too. Information of MPs or peers in their personal capacities does not come under the Act. In the US, the public does have access to most documents unless they fall under exempted categories. Political parties do not directly fall under the various exempted categories which largely pertain to information of personal privacy and confidentiality. Bureau Report, DD News.
Well, to understand the subject in greater detail, we are joined in the studio by Mr. Wajayat Habibullah, a former Chief Central Information Commissioner of India. In fact, he was the first Chief Information Commissioner of India. Mr. Anil Berwal is the National Coordinator of National Election Watch, and he was one of the persons who filed this petition with the RTI. And Swaraj Thapa is a senior journalist with the Indian Express. We'll start with you, Mr. Habibullah. Well, once elected, individuals become accountable if they take up public office. But the political parties to which they belong seem to want to remain private bodies, autonomous bodies, even though the public at large probably elects a political party rather than, an individual.
Well, to start with, I must disagree with the statement that you just recorded of my friend and mentor in many ways, Mr. Chidambaram, because the decision of the Central Information Commission is not particularly unusual. There are a number of decisions of the Central Information Commission extending to organizations which are not government organizations and outside, but have accepted the large sections. And of course the classic case is the Commonwealth Games Committee, the Indian Olympics Association, the Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee of Delhi, the Grihak Samaj of UP, which is a cooperative. Similarly, there are a number of such cases. I don't need to go through all of them. But in this case also, the Central Information Commission has taken a step further. In fact, I myself in 2009 had ruled that political parties are not public authorities. It's a decision which has been in fact set aside in this decision. But even though it is my decision that is set aside, I agree. I was a single member bench which gave that decision, and it was given in the absence of the parties because they had not turned up, and they had relied simply on an earlier ruling of the Central Information Commission of my colleague Mr. Tiwari, whereby political parties, the income tax returns of political parties had become fully disclosable. And mind you, that was a ruling that has not been challenged, not challenged to this day. It still stands. To say then that the finances of the parties are going to be disclosed, which were never disclosed before, is also incorrect.
Right. Mr. Bairwal, to what extent, what kind of information are you seeking from political parties? Because some of the arguments that they put forth are like, their internal party matters, those decisions which can be utilized by their political opponents and rivals against them. This sort of information should remain within the party.
Yeah. See, the only information that we have requested for is the details about their financial transactions. And if you look at the information which we have received under RTI from Income Tax Department, as a result of Mr. Tiwari's order in 2008, we find that the source of majority of this income, which in some cases runs into thousands of crores, the source is unknown. There is barely 10 to 12% of the source which is documented in these IT returns. So all we have requested for is that we want to know the source of this income, right? We have not requested any other information. In fact, the RTI Act has, there are large number of exemptions in there, which the political parties can rely upon. For example, it says that you don't have to disclose any information which might affect your competitive position. You don't have to give information which you might consider as trade secret. So there are enough exemptions built into the RTI Act where political parties don't have to disclose their internal matter. Now, some parties may also want to disclose their internal matter as part of their competitive strategy, but that is up to the political parties. As far as the RTI Act is concerned, it does not.
So you're mainly concerned really with their finances.
Absolutely.
Mr. Thapa, do you think that there are current laws and institutions that are in place? I mean, the laws like the Income Tax Act and institutions like the Election Commission are enough already, to furnish this kind of information?
Well, there are two issues that that one can see here, two separate, clear issues. One is the issue of transparency and accountability, on the part of political parties. On that issue, I don't have any, dispute with my colleagues, my friends here. I can say that I would also wish that there is transparency and accountability on the part of political parties. But the other issue is whether the CIC is competent to declare political parties or any other body, for instance, as a public authority, which I feel it does not have that kind of power. I mean, if you see the CIC Act, the CIC's Act is to adjudicate within what is public authorities whether a certain information can be given out or not. I mean, when somebody asks us for a certain information, then the CIC will sit on judgment whether that information is secret or not secret and can be given or not.
We'll need to take a short commercial break, and when we come back, there's a lot more to discuss. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Mr. Habibullah, the fact is that in this judgment, they have referred to political parties as public authorities, but in spirit, of Section D of 2H of the Act, not really in letter, in spirit. Is that sufficient enough?
No, no. That is not in spirit only, it is in letter. If I may read to you, Section
2HD is which it comes under, yeah.
By notification issued or order made by the appropriate government, and they're relying on that.
The appropriate government is the Election Commission.
Okay. You don't even have to go to there. Go to the Election Commission. And includes any, that is in addition.
Yes.
In addition, any body owned, controlled or substantially financed, any non-government organization substantially financed directly or indirectly by funds provided by the appropriate government. Now mind you, NGOs are not organizations set up by the government notification. This is in addition to that. And then substantially financed, this case, it's a 53-page judgment, which is longer than any judgment that I had written, but 53-page judgment goes into details of decisions made by the Information Commission itself, and further decisions made by all the courts. There's a host of decisions in this, deeming organizations of this nature, which I mentioned to you, the CWD and so on, as being organizations which are non-government organizations, private companies, but fall under the Act because they have been given substantial finance. And substantial finance in this case amounts to not only the fact that they are free houses, they have been given a huge exemption from taxation. Also, yes, your point that you have made is that comes under, in fact, to 2H1. The fact that they are under the Constitution, the Election Commission of India is a body set up under the Constitution, and the Election Commission of India notifies a political party. Only then it is a recognized political party.
Right, but what happens, Mr. Berwal, if, we accept that they do come under the RTI, but if a situation arises like in Nepal where, political parties do come under the RTI, but they don't, follow their obligations, and if we have our political parties not following their obligations, what's going to happen?
Well, see, the political parties, like any other body operating in India, they have to follow law of the land. And in this case, the law of the land is RTI Act. And RTI Act also provides provisions under which if somebody does not comply with the provisions of RTI Act, then they can be penalized by the Central Information Commission. And we hope that political parties have been saying, in fact, no party has said that they don't want to come under it because there are some problems in their financial transactions, etc. Every party is saying we are totally transparent, everything that we do is open to public, we are always in public scrutiny. So if that is the case...
One of their key arguments is, Mr. Berwal, that they don't want to come under two different authorities. They believe that the Election Commission is the one that conducts elections, and now you're giving them, you're giving the CIC authority over them as well.
No, there is no question of them getting authority, the CIC getting authority over them. In fact, just like any other act, it's not like political parties are jurisdicted only by Election Commission. For example, Income Tax Department also has some control over political parties. If they do any, for example, there is PIL right now that some foreign parties, political parties have got some funding from foreign companies, so they come under that act also. So it's not like they're above the law. Every appropriate authority in India, they are accountable to every political authority. It's not like they're reporting anything to CIC like they have to report to Election Commission. The CIC's jurisdiction is that if you don't provide information which the citizens of India have a right to access to under right to information, then only CIC's role come in. Similar, it's just like when Income Tax Department role will come in if these guys do not file their income tax returns. So it's not like it's any undue jurisdiction over them.
Mr. Thapa, do you think that it's sufficient, just to strengthen the media perhaps, or strengthen the Election Commission, because information really is available through the media?
Why this present controversy has come up? This has come up because some of the parties did not part with the information. Doesn't mean that all of them did not part. Two of the parties did give out information. It was only when some other parties did not give information that this issue rose, whether, in what manner they can part with information. But as far as the issue of, whether these parties are substantially funded by government, I think I have some kind of issue here, because the kind of statistics which have been given in the order itself, I mean, if you go through it carefully, it says that the land, etc., which has been given to political parties is to the tune of 500 and 1,000 crore, etc., the kind of astronomical figures which are there, which may very well be the case that you know, the land value is, of the plots, it's there today as it stands, is that much. But the fact is that the land was given much earlier, I mean years back, and you can't calculate it on the basis of today's value. I mean, then you have to really calculate it on the basis of what it was when it was actually given. The second point is that if you do that, then you have, you know, hospitals, you have clubs which have been given land in a similar manner, in a subsidized form by the government. So does it mean that all of these are going to come under
Answer
the
that question,
RTI
Mr.
Act?
Habibullah.
They do.
They do?
They do. The hospitals, in fact,
Private hospitals.
We have been private
Yes.
hospitals here. We've been able to enforce the rule that you see they are supposed to give, and you've heard about this, that 20% of their beds are supposed to be reserved for those who can't afford it. They were not doing it, mind you, until the RTI Act came, where a ruling was held for the very reason that Mr. Thapa is mentioning. I'm surprised that Mr. Thapa, he's a journalist, he should be saying more. We want more.
No, of course, absolutely. I'm saying more. That's why. That's why I'm only on.
But he's arguing from a legal standpoint. He's arguing from a legal standpoint.
I don't think journalists make good lawyers, but necessarily. But anyway, vice versa may also be true. But anyway, the point what I was trying to make is that yes, the point was raised, in fact, by Mr. Jaitley. But what about schools? What about others? But all of them have been declared public authorities.
But all of them have been receiving, sir, substantial funding from the government.
Not necessarily.
Here, how can you argue that there is substantial funding just because today's the land which has been given today, the market value is
I think the order also says,
the
Mr.
argument
Thapa,
that you've been given, Thapa, that so far as hospitals are concerned, they are all declared public authorities.
No, that is because they have agreed to become public authorities.
No. I'm very sorry. They did not agree.
They did not go to court.
No, they did. They resisted it
Okay.
in the Information Commission. They resisted that, and then they went to court, and the court has struck it all down.
Right,
In each of these cases, the courts have struck it down. But if I may go a little further,
Sure.
the point is that that is being discussed is that the finances will now be disclosed.
Right.
May I invite, and sorry to disappoint my friend Mr. Berwal, but the point is that there can also be under Section 81J, a person who donates money for the for a political party has the right to argue privacy.
Yes.
And right to say that this is private information which I'm not willing to give. And that would come under 81J. So political parties don't really have to be frightened about this, because I have given a ruling myself on the Prime Minister's Relief Fund, where I have ruled that the Prime Minister's Relief Fund, and this was against the opposition of the Prime Minister's Relief Fund, mind you, it was contested.
Okay.
But we ruled that the Prime Minister's Relief Fund is a public authority, but the person who are the donors to the Prime Minister's Relief Fund, their identity does not have to be disclosed.
Okay, we need to take a short commercial break on that point, but there's a lot more to discuss after that. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Mr. Berwal, you know, the RTI came about as because of a movement, and that movement still continues. You're one of the big activists in this movement. But what is the ultimate scope of this movement? What are you actually trying to reach? All information, you know, what kind of information? At the end of the day, you know, there's got to be some area where certain information is not available.
Right. See, first of all, we also have to look that in India, if we see, there are a lot of laws, and you know, almost everybody is covered under law. There is a law for schools, there is law for educational institutions, there is law for even to govern the temples and religious structures, but there is no law in India to govern political parties. And there have been commissions after commissions that have been set on it, and they have recommended, Election Commission has been sending recommendations to the government of India, but no action has been taken to bring in some laws to govern the functioning of political parties, except for this
Representation of People's Act.
Representation of People Act. In that also only Section 29, where they have to just declare these donations above 20,000 rupees.
Right.
So I think in the absence of all those laws, and now that people are asking for more transparency in the working of political parties, which are the institutions which are run in a very highly undemocratic fashion and run a democratic country, and everybody agrees that they are run in a highly undemocratic fashion, I think this bringing them under RTI is a substantial
Mr. Habibullah, some would argue that those are electoral reforms and not, you know, that those concern the Election Commission. They don't concern the Chief Information Commission.
Well, I would disagree with Mr. Berwal again so far as he says that they're undemocratically run. I don't think that necessarily the parties are all undemocratically run. But then in my view, they should welcome this. The point is that the Election Commission, of course, the Election Commission is a government body. The directions made by the Election Commission, are they being followed, are they not being followed? Tomorrow, you will say that if somebody commits murder, then that is not the job of the police. It is the job of the Election Commission. Obviously not.
Right.
It is the job of the police because it's an offence under that law. Similarly, not disclosing information which is supposed to be disclosed will then will attract the mischief of the RTI Act, not anything else. So, and there are a lot of provisions, as Mr. Berwal has mentioned, and here I agree with Mr. Berwal. There are a lot of provisions protecting in the person who is giving the information from disclosure in matters which could harmfully affect that person's functioning.
Right, Mr. Thapa, is there an argument that we are just judging sentiment rather than logic, or we're going by the public mood really, and the public mood generally wants political parties to be accountable, but perhaps the laws already exist that make them accountable, but that's not enough.
Well, absolutely. I mean, naturally there is a kind of sort of adverse sentiment against the political class, I mean, which has been over the years, and this sentiment runs quite deep, which is why there is this sense that maybe this thing is quite correct. So I would definitely argue that yes, as far as accountability and transparency, it should be there and it must be done, but there may be other ways to do it. In fact, the Election Commission and the Law Ministry had done a series of 7 rounds of consultations. They came out with a report also. I mean, it was a fairly good, decent report, I would say. But then, of course, I mean, maybe the government, people in the government did not like it, so they just have consigned it to.
No, but individually, Mr. Thapa, do you think that political parties are individually responsible to any individual citizen? They are not really. No. Well, currently, that doesn't seem to be the case. So the individual only has a right to vote, and he can exercise it once in 5 years. How much? What kind of accountability is that?
Well, no. I'm certainly with you on this one, in the sense that yes, how accountability can be got in what manner can they be held responsible for their actions, that is definitely a matter which needs to be studied and which needs to be imposed. But that is something which can be done through law. I mean, you can't do it suddenly through the CIC method. For instance, I mean, if I would ask Mr. Habibullah that what happens in the case of, let's say, political parties who do not take land from the government, or who do not say that I will not pay any income tax exemption on that. So will they be held also accountable on this case? Okay.
So
these are areas
Mr. Habibullah, I mean, it's only
the second thing is that I mean, although this ruling concerns only funding of political parties, but tomorrow it can be extended to any form of decision making within the political party. So at that point of time, what does the political party do? I mean, in the sense that somebody wants say that Mrs. Sonia Gandhi or Mr.
You seem to be running short of time, so let's get in, Mr. Habibullah.
I'll just finish in 2 seconds. They take a decision, somebody questions and says that we want to know what happened in this case. So how do you tackle that, Mr. Habibullah?
Well, the last question is easily answered. That is, you see, under the point of protection and from disclosure under Section H1, and I won't go into details of that. But the larger question is, let me put to you that I agree with young Mr. Thapa on one particular point. The Right to Information Act is not the end result. It is not the final means of ensuring accountability and transparency in government. It is the trigger. It is the trigger, and I think you will find that all the departments and organizations who have submitted to it have found it so. And I would include in this even the Supreme Court. For a while, it resisted coming under the law. The Office of the President at the time of Dr. Abdul Kalam resisted coming under this law. These are ones which have been greatly benefited, and they've found how they've been greatly benefited. And the Army. The Army resisted coming under the law. All these have been greatly benefited after coming under the law. So it is a trigger to promote transparency and accountability in a democratic society, which India is and aspires to be.
I think we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here on Late Edition. Well, the argument that political parties are already accountable to the public through various existing laws and institutions seems to be put forward by both political parties and legal luminaries alike as being sufficient. But these are collective accountabilities. These parties are not directly accountable to citizens except every 5 years through an election. And even then, not enough information is available to the public to check electoral malpractices such as use of money and muscle power. Then the fear that privacy and confidentiality of parties' internal discussions and decisions could be misused by political opponents is also not misplaced, and perhaps exemptions could be allowed. But the broader issue of transparency needs to be addressed if the public mood is to be understood correctly. You've been watching Late Edition. Thanks very much for your time. Namaskar.